WKRK, 1320 AM, 105.5 FM, cable 25, and worldwide at country.am. It is a Monday, and around 11:05, we're actually running a minute or two behind schedule, but I think people have come to expect that from me on Mondays. I drag just a little bit more than normal on Mondays.
Right, I think I do too.
Yeah, it's one of those you can just, you've had an active weekend and you're just ready to relax for a day.
Right.
Yeah.
It's been very active for us this week.
It has been a very active week in law enforcement, and I know you've received a tremendous amount of support from the community, and we want to talk about that too. But for folks that may not be keeping up with the TV news or just news around them, it has been a very serious, and it's getting worse, time with law enforcement and citizens rebelling or just protesting. Or in Dallas, there's been shootings.
Right.
Tell us about what's going on with our country and the interaction between law enforcement and citizens.
Well, there's been, as you know, a lot going on this week. And one of the things that we had talked about before the show started was that there's so much happening, it's kind of hard to keep different incidents differentiated from each other. A lot of information is overlapping.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to tell the difference between what incident happened in Minnesota and what happened in Louisiana and what happened in Dallas. And we've had some other local things happen in the Atlanta area, and some happened in Tennessee, and just a lot of different things going on in our world around us as far as different incidents. So it's kind of hard to keep them all straight. But in a nutshell, all the events this week basically stemmed around a Minnesota traffic stop involving a man by the name of Philando Castile.
Mm-hmm.
That was an officer-involved shooting, and this was just kind of the icing on the cake to a lot of things that's already been going on in our country, and a lot of animosity toward police, and a lot of different protests that were already happening and things that was going on in our country. This kind of sparked the outrage, as most people know, and has formed a lot of protests in different cities and in different places around, as far as citizens, the way they're being treated by police, the way that police are being treated by citizens. And all this kind of culminated together with the Dallas Police Department when they were protesting out in Dallas, and the police were there protecting those people. And you had this shooter that, from a sniper's position, started picking off police officers. Resulted in 5 officers killed, 7 injured, 2 citizens wounded. And that kind of threw everything to the other side, that where a lot of people were against the police, now people are supporting the police because of their actions and what they did to help the citizens out there. And one of the things I want to be sure that people understand is that the majority of the people in the country, the majority of the people in their area are midstream. Most people can kind of see both sides of what's going on, what's happening, and is kind of objective about both things. But you have some extremists on one hand that are very anti-police and anti-government that's fueling the fire. And then you have some people on the other side from racist tendencies and racist point of views that are fueling the fire on the other side. And unfortunately, the media focuses more on these extreme activities than they do on the mainstream where the majority of the people are at. And that just kind of keeps this thing fueled up and keeps it going across America. A lot of people didn't know this, and it's okay because there was no really any advertisement put out about it. But we kind of had a impromptu prayer meeting yesterday at the courthouse steps. This was kind of put on by Journey Church. Diana Garrett and her husband, Patrick, that put this on. They invited the sheriff's office and the police departments to come down and speak yesterday and kind of have prayer with the community and do a unification kind of thing, and we did that. And I thought it was good to see, even on a short notice, just a one-day notice of seeing the community show up for that and seeing the community take part in that and trying to be unified in finding real solutions to the problems that's going on out there. One of our issues is in America that I think that we focus on these extremists and we focus on these extreme point of views. That we're not really spending a whole lot of time in the mainstream as far as to try to find real solutions to the problems that are out there. And I think that's kind of what our main problem is in America.
Right. What is the morale right now at the sheriff's office? What are your officers and your staff talking about right now?
Well, one of our big things right now is safety. It's just safety issues. I've put a couple emails out to my deputies and to the police departments around, along with the highway patrol and different agencies that we deal with. It's just a reminder, that regardless of what's going on in the world around us, and regardless of what's happening with animosity toward police and being ever vigilant, we still have a job to do.
Right.
And we still have to treat people with respect and treat people with kindness and treat our communities with love. We still have to do that.
Right.
And so as police officers and law enforcement officers, sheriff's deputies, highway patrol, and all the people that's out there, we have to rise above the anger. We have to rise above the frustration. We have to rise above these things that are out there and continue to put our citizens in the forefront and continue to protect and serve those of which we're called to serve. And even though there's a safety issue out there, and even though that we are being even more cautious than we have been in the past, and I've noticed over the course of this past week a lot of calls for service and things where normally one person would handle it. Now we're kind of seeing two people go, and we're kind of seeing some kind of officers moving in to kind of help each other just in case something happens. So there's a safety feeling there that we need to be more cautious than we ever have before.
Right.
But also I try to encourage people, don't let your fears dictate what you do, and don't treat people differently because of the anger and because of frustration, because of fear that may be out there. But realize that we still must treat people with kindness and respect.
Yeah. And in your job, it's not always easy to. You have to get frustrated. Your officers have to get frustrated dealing with people just doing things that, they shouldn't be doing, and just showing a lot of disrespect.
Well, one thing is, and it's a very difficult situation to deal with, but we must realize and acknowledge that nationwide there is an issue with race. There is an issue with the frustration and the anger. There is an issue with people who are being treated differently. And so when we are conducting a traffic stop, for example, or we're investigating a crime, sometimes because of other people, because of their history and the way they've been treated, the race issue may come up right off the bat. Right. And the person may accuse the officer of being racist, or may accuse the officer of doing things based on skin color. But we must realize and we must understand that we have to deal with that. That's part of our society. That's part of what we have to deal with. And as police officers, we can't automatically go on the defensive, and we can't automatically enter into an altercation with someone because of accusations that are made. We have to be professional. We have to treat people professionally. And one of the issues with this thing yesterday, and talking with several people that are there, one of the things I want to remind people is that if you are being treated differently, if there are racist things going on, if there's things that officers are not doing what they're supposed to do, there's remedies for that already in place. There's there's complaints you can file. They can be investigated. There's civil remedies through civil court. There's also laws on the books that prevent this. So there's actually criminal charges that can be filed against officers and other people if they're doing things from a criminal point of view. So there's already remedies in place for that. On the side of the road in the middle of the night is not a place to get in an altercation about it. No. That's not the time to create a fuss or a fight. If you're being treated unfairly, comply with what the officer asks you to do. Comply with what they're instructing you to do. If the officer's wrong, then we need to deal with that later. We needed to deal with those complaints. And as a law enforcement agency, we need to deal with those people that don't need to wear a badge. We need to deal with those people who are misusing their power. But we can't do that if no complaints filed. And we can't do that if altercations are taking place on the roadside, because by the time the backup officer gets there or other officers get there, the only thing they see is a fight. Right. They just see an altercation, and they don't know what led up to it. So normally, naturally, they're going to defend their fellow officer. They're going to help that officer arrest someone. They're going to help that officer defend himself. Right. So that roadside is not the place to take care of that. There's other ways and places to take care of that.
Right. And like you said, there are those that nationwide that may be wearing a badge who there's going to be good and bad
Right.
of all.
I tell people all the time that come to my office and talk about different issues and things that law enforcement is no different than being a banker. It's no different than working in a company. It's no different than any other job that's out there. Is you have real good people who love their job and do their job well.
Right.
And you have bad people that shouldn't be there in the first place. Right. That's not going to do a good job. And so our responsibility as law enforcement and as being leaders in law enforcement and being chiefs of police and sheriffs and agency leaders, our responsibility is to look through our offices and our employment and weed out those that shouldn't be there and weed out those that don't need to carry a badge or don't need to carry a gun. Now, since I've been elected, I will tell you there's been a lot of people that has left my office. Some I've asked to leave, and some I've asked not to come back. And there's others that's left for different reasons. And I don't want you to think that everyone that's left is bad people that don't need to be there. But I will tell you this, from the philosophies and from the things that we're trying to develop as a sheriff's office, there are good officers out there that doesn't fit in with our philosophies, that doesn't fit in with what we're trying to accomplish. Right. And so it's not necessarily they're bad people or bad officers. It's just that they don't fit in with our philosophies and what we're trying to accomplish here. And so we have a responsibility also with that is try to put people in place to develop the atmosphere and the attitude that we want to develop and to make sure that people are taken care of, to make sure people are treated kindly and fairly. And so those are things that we have tried to develop over the last couple of years at the sheriff's office.
You deal with a lot of bad situations every single day, you and your officers and the whole staff, and you're not always seeing the best side of people. At some point, do you get a bit desensitized to, I used to work in a newsroom in Raleigh, and, the whole purpose was to find news. And I remember one day it was a slow news day on a Sunday, and one of the news anchors was saying, "I sure wish something bad would happen so I could have something to talk about." I'm like, no, that's wrong. So the news anchors, I know, do get desensitized. Do you do that in your?
I think all law enforcement officers do if once they spend time in law enforcement. One of our fellow officers made a comment the other day at the sheriff's office. He was from a police department, but he was there and he made this comment, and I tend to agree with it. North Carolina has 30-year retirement for law enforcement officers. A lot of other states have 20-year retirement. And he's about the same as me. He's got about 20 years in law enforcement. He made the comment, he said, I'd really like to retire. And he said, but what I'm about to say doesn't have to do with that. It has to do with the fact of that with this day and time, nobody needs to be in law enforcement 30 years. Nobody needs to deal with this for 30 years. And he said, we really need 20-year retirement because it's just too long for people to stay in law enforcement. And, and I thought about that a lot this week after the events that's happened this week, and I understand what he was trying to say. And what he was trying to say was that very fact of what you just said. You do get desensitized. You get, a lot of times, if you don't make a conscious effort, you get to where you see so much violence, you see so many bad things that happen, you deal with things on a daily basis, to where you have to figure out a way to deal with it within yourself. In my career, I look back over my career, and I've alluded to few of these things in the Facebook post I put out this week, but I've had the unfortunate thing happen in my career that I've seen multiple people commit suicide in front of me. I've seen people lose their lives at the hands of others. I've been at car wrecks where children were killed. I've seen some serious assaults and rapes, and and all these different things where you're dealing with victims and dealing with the bad things in life that happens, and you have to find a way to get through that. You have to find a way to be normal. You have to find a way to still have your family at home and all those kind of things and not let it affect that. One of the things I told a person yesterday while we were there at the courthouse steps, myself and a couple other officers were joking about some things, and nothing bad, just laughing, just being humorous. And one of the ladies there, she said, "I sure am glad that y'all can see some humor in all the dark things that's going on." And I made the comment to her, I said, if people were on crime scenes and saw officers and saw the way they talked about things and joked about things, whatever, they would think that they're uncaring. They would think that they don't have any respect for the scene or respect for the blood and gore and things they're seeing. But the truth of the matter is, and it's like I explained to her, sometimes you have to laugh to keep from crying.
Right.
And sometimes the way of dealing with things is with humor and with trying to lighten the mood or lighten the situation. And that's not just true of law enforcement, but it's also true of EMS and fire and a lot of the rescue folks that are out there. But you have to do something to try to normalize yourself. You have to do something so these images in your mind's eye don't consume you, and so that you don't dwell on it each and every day. And it's a lot like our military folks that come back that suffer from PTSD and a lot of things they see in the military. One of the things I had found out through taking some PTSD classes and understanding about PTSD is it doesn't necessarily have to be one traumatic event that causes PTSD, but it could be a series of events. It could be a lot of different things in your life that compounds together that could cause that. And so I would dare say that in America there's a lot of police officers and a lot of EMS and a lot of fire that's suffering through PTSD type things and type symptoms that may not even know it. They may not even know they're dealing with it. And they're just looking for ways to cope, looking for ways to deal with the things that are out there. So that was a long answer to answer your question, but the answer is yes, you do desensitize yourself to a lot of things. And sometimes I have to remind myself, and I encourage other officers to remind themselves, that is still somebody. Right. That's still somebody's child. It's still somebody's parent. It's still somebody's brother or sister. And when we deal with people, sometimes we get so used to, over a long career, we get so used to dealing with these different situations as we see it with just another domestic, just another drunk, just another shooting, just another thing. And we tend to forget that even though this is just another to us, that it's a traumatic experience for that person that's going through it. So we have to deal with those things also and remind our officers of that. And I think that's kind of where officers get in trouble a lot of times, where we're seeing all these things that's on the news, is that because of that desensitization, it reverts a lot back to training and a lot back to these things, and they take the human element out of it because you can't cope with it if you think about the human element involved in it. So I think for a lot of the training, we need to go back to our police departments and sheriff's offices, is we need to go back to that human side, that understanding that there is a person on the other end, and we need to treat everybody on these calls with kindness and respect when the situation allows.
I think a lot of it has to do with just communication. If both parties would just sit there and have a conversation, talk to each other, not at each other.
Right.
I mean, it's never a pleasant situation, I would imagine, having law enforcement come into your house and arrest you. But usually those are when the tempers are very high and you're saying and doing things, or you may be intoxicated, that you would normally not do. But if the law enforcement and the person, if there was a conversation to figure out the problem instead of focusing, amplifying that problem.
Well, one of the things to remember also, Tim, is that every day in America, I saw these statistics somewhere recently. I tried to go back and find them so I could document it, but I don't even remember where it was now. But statistically in America, law enforcement has about 5.4 million contacts with the citizens each and every day as far as investigating crimes, traffic stops, those type of things. When you factor in interviewing witnesses, civil service, just your changing flat tires, just having contact with people.
Right.
Law enforcement has contact with about 11 million people every day in the United States. Out of contact with 11 million people every single day, annually, there's about 26,000 complaints filed annually.
Wow.
And that is very slim. It's like 0.04% of all contacts ends up in a complaint. That's less than half of 1% of your contacts. But out of that 26,000 complaints that's filed, only about half of those are substantiated complaints, or there's some type of evidence or legitimacy to the complaint. So you take that, and it's even half of that. So you're down to about a quarter of 1% of all contacts in the United States wind up in a complaint. And when you think about those numbers, you think about the fact of that the media tries to blow this up and blame it as there is a law enforcement issue, a law enforcement problem that all officers need retrained. I contend that it's not a problem with all law enforcement and all officers, but I contend that we need to do a better job vetting employment. We need to do a better job of weeding people out that don't need to be there. We need to do a better job of looking for indicators and factors of officers that need help, looking for factors of officers that have aggression and anger issues, look for officers who have problems with judgment calls, because in law enforcement, you literally have to make a judgment in a millisecond. And so if you have a person who is unable to make quick judgment calls, even though they may be the best person in the world and can do a great job writing a report, that doesn't necessarily mean they need to be on patrol, carrying a gun, having contact with the public each and every day. Because it is split-second decision-making that's going on out there. So I think of the training that needs to be done, and what needs to be done in America is facing where these real issues are and where these real problems are, and addressing these real problems that are out there. Does that mean that you can't have a 30-year veteran that has a perfect, unblemished record make a mistake? No, they can still make a mistake. They can still do these things. But I think that if we would look at the officers that are out there, we could cut that 1/4% winding up complaints. We can cut that down even more. We can cut that down to even fewer complaints than that. But going back to what we talked about with the media, where the media is focused in on these extremes, and they're focused in on these extreme issues. And unfortunately, with the national media, that makes it look like that all law enforcement are this way, or it makes it look like that all protesters are this way, or it makes it look like that everybody of color has this opinion, And so we need to understand that most of us are somewhere in the middle on this.
Right. And talking about the national media too, we do see usually larger cities affected by these kind of things, but that's not always the case. Even over the weekend, there was a report from WLOS. The Bryson City Police Department had arrested 3 people. I guess it was over the weekend. They were from Kentucky, but they were in Bryson City, and they were. I think alcohol had a lot to do with this, but they were going down, screaming or shouting, "F the police, let's kill us a cop." And this is in Bryson City, just down the road from us. And they were released on $500 bond, which, again, we understand that's not the punishment. That's to ensure they return to court. And I know that probably outrages people, too, even in law enforcement, to know that $500 just to make sure that they come back. That seems, for that kind of threat, it would be higher. But even last week, I
don't know the situation on this. I don't know if they do have a residence here or what that may be there. I'm not really unsure of that. But it would just seem to me, if it was someone from out of town who lived in a different state who were making those kind of threats in this day and time, it probably, my opinion, should be a little higher than $500.
Just to make sure they're going to be back.
Yeah, I mean, if you took everything else out of the equation, just someone living out of state on a communicating threat charge, I think the bond should be a little higher, so to ensure they would come back from court. But that's just my opinion.
Even on our WKRK Facebook page last week, it's either Friday or Saturday, something was mentioned about here's the process about press releases and things like that, and then someone below there says F the police, which I immediately deleted. Thank goodness that gets filtered out.
We deal with that almost on a daily basis.
It has to get discouraging because you're just basically being stereotyped into one.
Right, and that goes to what I talked about the extremes, about what the media portrays out there. What we experience in rural law enforcement and rural communities is much different than what people face in inner city issues and inner city problems. Law enforcement's different. The peoples are different. The way they interact with each other is different. So a lot of times what happens is in these cities, because things are different, they do enter into these problems and things that are there. And it filters down to these rural areas where they're getting bombarded by these images from television, and where you have these police officers that are in riot gear, and several of them are hitting one person with a baton or whatever. that's the image that's being shown on television, where it sparks outrage with everyone else in the communities. However, we don't know what led up to that. We don't know why they're hitting that person. We don't know why that person's been arrested. We don't know if they pulled a gun on the officers right before that. We don't know if they hit them with rocks right before that. We don't know what happened right before that. But those images are burned in people's minds.
Right.
I will tell you this, we've had, this past week, we had a police officer here in Murphy who was eating with his wife in plain clothes at one of our local restaurants. And there was a group of men behind them that was talking very loudly and cursing in a booth behind him. He was not wearing anything police. They didn't know he was a police officer. But they were talking very loudly about having desires to kill police officers, having desires to shoot people, having desires to do these things, and basically the same thing about F the police, and and I'm going to do something intentionally, get stopped, and when I do, I'm going to shoot a police officer, and all those kind of things, And that was right here in Murphy.
Wow.
And he was off duty, of course, and didn't want to address that by himself, and he called other officers in to kind of identify the people and get tag numbers and know where they are and that kind of thing. But even at that, we intercept Facebook messages. We see things on social media from residents right here in Cherokee County and from the surrounding counties that post things from time to time on media about shooting mass people, about having mass casualties. And one person posted on there that the quickest way to evil is to shoot a lot of people for no reason, and he had posted pictures with AK-47s and stuff and say, "You don't think I'll do it? Try me," those kind of things. And so we have to track those things down and address those things and try to interview those people to see where they're at. We have to work with the FBI and the SBI on these type things, and make sure that we get these people documented for any future problems that may be and things of that nature. So those are things that we deal with in addition to what you see in the papers and what you see, that's going on out there. Where the sheriff's office does a lot for the community and in the community that the people don't ever see and don't ever know about.
I think one of the problems too, if we remember back in when we were growing up, we were taught that police officers are our friends, and I think a lot of adults know that they're doing something illegal, and their kids are being brought to fear, and police are not our friends.
Right. Yeah.
Is that a situation that could be turned around so that
I
young
think it
folks?
is. I met with some people before the events of this past week, earlier last week. I met with some people about trying to implement some programs to get into the school system, to try to do some awareness and education programs and things in Cherokee County. I'm a firm believer in the way to fix a lot of these problems that's going on in our communities is through education, is through awareness and training, and getting officers in the school systems, getting officers building relationships with people at an early age. And a lot of those kids, when you think about this, those kids that are in the school system, for a lot of those, the only time they ever have interaction with a police officer is when he's coming in the house and he's arresting mom or arresting dad, and bad things are happening, or mom and dad's got in a fight and somebody's hurt. Now the police is there dragging one of them off to jail, and they don't get to see them because they're in jail, and it's all the police's fault because they're in jail. A lot of the young people, that's the only time they ever have interaction with police. And so what I want to do is for these next couple of years is try to enter into some of these programs to where we can start developing that mindset and turn around that mindset to where, the police may have come to your house and took dad to jail, but we're there to protect you. We're there for you if you have anything that's going on that you need to talk to somebody about. When I was teaching within the school system, law enforcement classes there, and doing these type of programs in the school system, I found that after just a few weeks, it didn't take very long, but after just a few weeks, then children would start coming to me and telling me things and talking to me and wanting to share with me things that are going on in their life. And you can build relationships fairly easily with young folks and with young people. But those relationships you build are relationships that will last a lifetime. And there's children now that are graduating high school that are, over the last few years, have been graduating high school that were children that I taught the programs at in school that they still see me on the streets and come up to me. Some of them hug my neck. Some of them still write me, email me, still do these things, just because of relationships that was built 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Wow, that's great.
And hopefully those things will go on. And I think that is the way of impacting our communities. But one thing we need to understand also is all these things that's going on in America, we will never find a solution. There will never be an answer until people quit pointing fingers at others and blaming everybody for everything that's going on, and sit down around a table and not just say, how can you change, but say, how can I change too?
Right.
How can we change together? How can we fix this together? When we start having a conversation and start figuring out how we can fix this together, and being open and honest and being realistic about the things that are going on.
And just accept that people are different from each other. We're not clones.
Right. And once we do that, then we can go to a place of healing. Then we can go to a place of restoration. But as long as we're out here and we are not willing to listen to what the protesters are saying, and we're not willing to listen to what the community is saying, and the community is not willing to see our side of things and the law enforcement side of things, if we're still with those mindsets, then there won't be healing. There won't be anything fixed. But one encouraging thing that I have seen, and I have seen over the past few days, is watching some of these programs on television. I'm seeing more and more of people of all races in the midstream of this coming out and saying to their own race, to their own people, to their own law enforcement agencies, of saying back to them, you're wrong. We need to do this differently. And so I think that is the starting point. I think that's what we're seeing happening in our country now. And as that grows, and we understand that Black lives absolutely matters. It matters. And when we understand that blue lives absolutely matters, and we understand that brown lives and white lives and everybody's lives matter, when we understand that everybody matters, then we can reach a solution.
Yeah, we definitely have to unite and just be accepting of other people. And that's just, being stubborn all of our lives get us nowhere. But one thing we do have here in our small community, and we love living in Cherokee County, North Carolina, is you and I interact every Monday, so our community gets to hear the positive things that law enforcement in our community does. I mean, we do post press releases and things like that, but there's so much that I think our community is exposed to on the positive side. And a lot of that doesn't get recognized, and maybe we should recognize that more. Well,
I will say this from all members of our community, no matter what race, no matter where you're from, I do see in our community a closeness. I see in our community a willingness to be united, a willingness to stand together. And so, like yesterday with the courthouse steps and with the prayer and stuff that was going on there, what my goal is and what I see out of all this is I want us to continue that. And I want us to continue the open dialogue and talking about issues and things that are going on. I don't want, because of what's happening in Louisiana or what's happening in Dallas or Minnesota or anywhere else in the world, I don't want that divisiveness to come to Cherokee County. And I don't want us to divide into different camps because what's going on around the world. I want us to stay united here in Cherokee County in western North Carolina. And when we have problems and issues here, not to invite all that other stuff to come, but us sit down and talk about what's our solution for our community.
Right. Another thing that I do respect is the fact that we live in a community where there's our station, Dennis Jean's station, Ralph's TV4, the newspaper. We all have a good working relationship, and I think good respect for each other and for your office too. And none of us seem to have this desire to come and give you that gotcha moment. We're not trying to create sensational news. And
well, I'll tell you what I really believe, Tim. I really do believe this, and I don't know, somewhere in the future it may come back and bite me. I don't know. But I really do believe that as long as you're not doing anything wrong and you're not trying to hide things and you're not trying to do things behind the curtain, then I don't think there's a gotcha moment to be had. I think as long as we leave everything out in the open and understand where we're at, then we can sit down and talk about things. Because there's no skeleton to jerk out of the closet.
Right. All right. Well, we've gone just a little bit over time, but that's
It was worth it.
It's a Monday. This is what we're supposed to do on
You're supposed to be
Mondays,
behind on
right?
Monday, aren't you? I do want to say one thing before we go, though.
Uh-huh.
I did hear on Party Line something about blackberries and jams and jellies and
Yes.
pies and all that. Just so anybody listening out there, I really like blackberry jam and I really like blackberry pies. So.
So he will be extremely happy. And by the way, that does remind me, I saw from Andrews Police Department, your office, Murphy Police Department, after all this happened, there's an outpouring of people coming in doing nice things.
Oh, there he is. There he is.
Can you share with us just a few things?
Yeah, I know people have been not only. I was just joking about that, of course. I'm not asking for anybody to do anything for me, but there has.
If you do, he might share.
But
with
I
me,
will
so,
take it.
Yes,
Yeah.
go ahead and take it off.
Yeah, if anybody wants to bring me jam, I will take it. But the thing about it is people have been bringing stuff by.
Mm-hmm.
We've had people drop off just cakes and donuts and things of that nature, just put in the break room for the officers. A lot of people have called. A lot of people have come by when we're out on the street and go to restaurants and things like that. There's been an outpouring of the public just to say thank you, just a pat on the back, just being appreciative, and those type of things. So we have had very good responses from our community of the things that's going on out there.
When all the negative news media is showing all this nasty behavior from people, just knowing that you live in a community that does support you, that has to be reassuring.
It is. And Adam Wishon, one of my friends over in Macon County Sheriff's Office, we used to work together here in Cherokee County. Adam had posted something on Facebook the other day about doing a traffic stop over there in Macon County, and when he looked up, there was a vehicle pulled in behind him, and it kind of made him nervous with everything that's going on. But he noticed as he was getting out of his patrol car and looked, the truck that pulled in behind him had a law enforcement tag on the front of it. Mm-hmm. And so the guy just kind of waved at him. Adam went up to the car, done what he needed to do, wrote the ticket, came back to his car, and as he come back and the other car was driving off, he looked at the truck, and the truck just gave him a thumbs up sign, just to let him know, I'm here watching you. I'm
Very
here.
good.
Got your back kind of thing. And so I think what we're seeing is more and more of the citizens that are out there just acknowledging and letting us know that they are watching out for us. They do have our back. And so we are very, very appreciative for that.
Well, thank you, Sheriff. We appreciate it. And we appreciate your taking time on Mondays to come and share what's going on with the Sheriff's Office, our community, and as today, our country.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll do this again next Monday, same time, same place.
Be here.
I'll see you then. It's WKRK 105.5 FM, 1320 AM, cable 25, and worldwide at country.am.